So you just look at the issues of today. I mean, people are frustrated by greed. Unless, of course, it's you being greedy, and then you're not frustrated by it at all. You're kind of thinking it's kind of nice. And people are frustrated by poverty. Why does poverty even exist? Why doesn't God do something about it? And so we need to do something about it. People are bothered by crime. How come they don't just make some more laws and make sure these people are controlled better? Why doesn't anyone do anything about all of these things? And obviously they do, don't they? They use the world's wisdom and they point out all of the problems using the world's wisdom. But have you seen anybody yet that's dealt adequately with any of them? You can answer honestly. Of course not. Because the world's wisdom, by its nature, it excludes as a cause the humanity within us. And the problems with our humanity is that we're broken, that we're separated from God, that we have a sin nature. And it excludes that problem from the discussion. That can't be the problem. Because we can't solve that problem. And in fact, in order to solve that problem, we have to yield ourselves. And that goes against myself. And that's part of the problem. Just by way of example, let me show you something. Back when I was in seminary, I read a study that I had to read for a pastoral theology class that showed that through empirical research, it showed that people who were part of a strong faith community and who prayed regularly and sincerely believed healed faster after injury or surgery than people who did not. There you go. Empirical fact. A study was done. But do you think the researcher can tell us how to have that sincere belief in God? No, that had to be excluded from a study in order to get it published. You can't put that kind of thing into a write-up. See, the Magi, by their wisdom and training, were able to know there was a king, but not where to find the king. We know inherently that there's a king. The question is, are we going to yield ourselves and avail ourselves to finding him? And maybe they even knew that they needed a king, but they didn't even know really how to access him or what to do once they did. And that's what's amazing about Christmas, really, when you think about it. We couldn't access the king. We can't access the king. And so the king came to us. It's amazing. And really what that shows us is really just how superficial the wisdom of the world is. Christmas shows us the wisdom of the world is superficial. There's something really hilarious about these people, just taking it on face value, these people, these wise men, the elites of the day, as I said, the intelligentsia, and telling them, get up from your esteemed high places and go to Bethlehem. No, to us, in all of our tradition, we think of Bethlehem as being a great place to go. I mean, if you take a tour of Israel as a Christian, you end up in Bethlehem at some point, provided there's not a war going on. See, but back then, Bethlehem wasn't an urban center. Bethlehem was a backwater village. It was plain, it was ordinary. And there was no real cultural center even nearby. Oh, yes, there was. There was Jerusalem. It was like 10 miles away, according to all the people that I've read. Yeah, but Rome? Do you know how Rome thought of Jerusalem? It was a backwater place. Like you got banished to rule in Jerusalem. That was where your career went to die. And so right there is the contrast with the wisdom of the world, because the wisdom of the world says, if you're really going to make a difference in life, you have to go to the right schools, you have to have the right skills, you need to know and gather the right people around you, you have to time things correctly. However, God sets up the beginning of Jesus' life under the single, think about that. Literally, the single most influential person to ever walk the face of the earth. Even time agrees to that, by the way. And he breaks all of the world's conventions in doing this. Jesus was not born of the right family. He was not born in the right place. He did not have the right credentials. He wasn't educated in the best schools or by the best rabbi. He never wrote a book. He didn't lead an army. And despite what you see in all the Baroque and Renaissance paintings, he probably wasn't very attractive. Just saying. He's probably a regular guy. He didn't do anything the world's way, but he did do it God's way. See, God's way is we're not going to do anything superficially. The way up is down. The way to get power is to serve. The way to true fulfillment is to give up what the world values and give it away. Yeah, make it personal. When the world says that a pastor is worth paying attention to if he has a large church, what are you all doing here? If he has a large church, a large following, then he's somebody that you should be paying attention to. Or if he writes books, or if he has really white teeth. But that's the kind of checklist that the world comes up with, and you just assume then that nothing good can be being said by a pastor that's in a small church in a small town. I mean, if he really had something to say, he would have left that job and he would have found a better one. Oh, I see what you're doing there, Pastor. You're trying to get a small following for your little small church there, aren't you? And I have to say, maybe. I mean, it's hard for me to analyze my own motivations. Sin and the heart are still here in me. And so it's hard for me to know my own motivations. But when you examine the world's way of doing things, it's pretty easy to see that the wisdom of the world is really pretty superficial, isn't it? How you dress or where you were educated, those are the kinds of things that make you worth listening to? Really? God has shown the wisdom of the world to be foolishness by the very birth of Jesus Christ. He was born in a manger to a poor, unwed mother with shepherds acting as his heralds. He was born in the wrong place to the wrong people. And even when important people did come to him, they were magicians. I won't even invite them to my kids' birthday parties. In the end, it all works because God is in it, of course. And behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshiped him. That's an amazing statement that we just take as part of the story. Well, of course he did. I mean, we've heard that since we were little kids. They presented him with costly gifts. It was costly for them to bow down and worship him. One, it was costly to their ego. This kid in this small backwater town to these insignificant family. I mean, and then they present these gifts, and they were expensive. And a lot of ink has been spilled on the gifts. We're not going to get into the gifts. But the point is they bowed down and they worshiped at great cost to themselves. And then look at what happens. This is just like a sidebar to those of you who have found Jesus and are sort of wondering why you might be scuffling along in your faith, because that happens. Right? We have our mountaintops, we have our valleys too. Look at what happens. Jesus goes from worship of the intelligentsia, and you think, oh, it's all going to be uphill from here. I mean, look at this. They've got wealth now because of the gifts that were laid at Jesus' feet, and they've got the worship of these magi who are certainly going to go tell everybody about it. And so it's got to be just nothing but just going to be future glory for this guy. Now, we don't have time really to look at the rest of chapter 2 this morning, but it tells us about how Herod tried to kill every child in Bethlehem because of these magi coming. And how the family flees to Egypt, and they only come back after Herod dies. And so the end result of all of that is that everyone loses track of the child that the magi worshipped. Nobody knew who it was anymore. Jesus goes from being celebrated by the intelligentsia to anonymity to ultimate humbling. That's how God works. But then he comes back to ultimate exaltation of his name. It takes about 33 years, but it happens. See, the Magi saw the signs. They didn't come in with expectations to be met. There were no ultimatums. As long as he does this, then I'll know he's the one. Nope. They just worshiped. By some divine revelation, they realized this is what we've been looking for all our lives. And let me suggest to you that you can have the exact same kind of experience as these wise men. You can see Jesus Christ as the ultimate wisdom of God. Everyone, everywhere on the face of our planet is looking for something, but the ultimate fulfillment can only be found in the worship of Jesus Christ. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 1, has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and folly to Gentiles. Why is it a stumbling block? Why is it folly? Because of the route that he took. Because he died. He wasn't a great man. That's why it's folly. That's why the Gentiles look at it as folly. It's a stumbling block to the Jews because he said he and the Father are one. And God doesn't raise people from the dead. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. So the Magi were thinking they were the wise men, right? That's what they thought. And they went into this small backwater village to find a child who was a king, born to a poor mother and father. But they followed the signs. They did. They followed the evidence, and they found him. Here's what I know. If you seek God, you will find him. He promises that. You may read about a child, you may read about a teacher or a rabbi, but if your eyes are open, you will find so much more than that. If you truly want to find him, you will find more than a child or a king. So much more. You'll discover the true wisdom of God, which says the way up is down. The way to glory is through humility. And if you're willing to humble yourself, if you're willing to prostrate yourself before that king, you'll have found something very worthwhile indeed. You'll find true wisdom that brings value and meaning to every part of your life. If you'll humble yourselves at the foot of the cross, you'll find out what the manger really means. You'll discover meaning and purpose, and all that you really value can be expended, can be given away in worship of the one that truly values for all time, for eternity, and will never change.